is in grave danger as temperatures rise due to the greenhouse effects from fossil fuel emissions. This is a fact. Science has proved it, and they cannot scream it enough, and we cannot echo that message. It is trapping heat radiation from the sun, and it's causing an increase in carbon dioxide, and thus this is causing a lot of terrible problems for our oceans, for our atmosphere, for nature, and every life on this planet. The most alarming research has shown how fast the temperatures are rising in the past 10 years. The ocean regulates the Earth's temperature. The consequences from the increase of the CO2 in our atmosphere are causing an increase in the temperature and thus an increase in ocean acidity that calcifies marine species. It's killing our coral reefs. About 50% of our world's coral reefs are dead. It's also disturbing the ocean's ecosystem in great proportions. What we need to keep in mind is that people are relying on sea protein. The sea levels are rising and the oceans are swelling, and since 1994, each year Earth has lost about 400 billion tons of ice from melting glaciers. This has filled the oceans, and our coastal regions are flooded. The increase in extreme weather conditions and increase in extreme heat weather events and heat waves are also increasing at an alarming rate. Basically, seawater is also an electrical conductor and interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. We're also facing water pollution problems with toxic chemicals discarded in our oceans and drinking water. Each year, people discard enough plastic to circle the Earth 4 times, and the oceans contain 6 times more plastic than life. Styrofoam and bottles are killing animals, and they're killing us in turn. It's hard to believe that in this advanced technological era that we are facing these issues. Environmental challenges and strategies and studies to migrate the water crisis and protect our most precious natural resources are vital today for our very existence. We're also going to be discussing sustainability, energy efficiency, building biology and architecture and planning, as well as health impact in our communities, providing net zero water and energy in residences and communities, and alternative methods against plastic pollution and water toxicity. We are not only here to give you information of what's going on. The distinguished panel will give us some ideas and strategies of how we can make an impact on reversing all what we have caused on our planet Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin with Fabian Cousteau. Of course, introductions are not necessary, however, we must acknowledge that he's an aquanaut, oceanographic explorer, environmental advocate, and founder of the Fabian Ocean Learning Center. Fabian is the first grandson of the legendary Jacques-Yves Cousteau. Fabian spent his early years aboard his famous grandfather's ships, and he learned from the very best, his grandfather and his father. Fabian is well known for his study of sharks as the explorer at large for National Geographic's show on misconception of sharks. He produced a documentary on sharks, Mind of a Demon. Fabian was then part of a multi-hour series for PBS. He was part of a multi-hour series for PBS, which continued also his father, Jean-Michel Cousteau's epic series on ocean adventures. Fabian has been working with local communities and children for the past couple of years worldwide to help restore the local water ecosystems. In June 2014, Fabian and his team of aquanauts embarked on Mission 31, the longest science expedition to take place at Aquarius, the world's only underwater marine laboratory located in Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, Fabian Cousteau. His dream is to fulfill and make a vehicle to make the world positive and cause a positive change in the world, and of course, beginning from the oceans. Fabian, please enlighten us. We are at a crossroads. Climate change is faster than the scientists have predicted in the last decade. What is going on with our oceans? What is climate change doing to our marine life and oceans?
Well, it's a pleasure to be amongst all of you. Yanna, thank you so much for that lengthy introduction. I feel embarrassed already that we had, I think, 3 false introductions with the film, much to my hand. I guess the short version, well, first of all, I'd like to thank all my fellow panelists. Yanna, thank you for moderating this, and of course, Susana, and the UN Recreation Council and the Salus Network. Thank you all so much for being here. Of course, all of you as well. We have at no other time in history more challenges than we do now, quite simply. Not so much for saving the planet, but for saving ourselves. And by default, by thinking that way, as selfish as human beings can be, we must by default save our planet and care for it as if it were our life support system, because it is. No water, no life, no healthy ocean, no such thing as healthy people. I've had the unbelievable privilege of being able to go on expeditions for many, many years, since the ripe old age of 7. I've been scuba diving since I was, since my 4th birthday. Not quite legal, but that's a topic for another day. We have been known to push beyond the boundaries sometimes in order to be able to come back with more information, more exciting stories. And before I dive into this extraordinarily deep topic of climate change, I think I'd love to share with you something that has only been shared with 2 network executives since it's been created, and that's a little teaser of basically a summary of why our family is so addicted to ocean for 3 generations. So with that, if you could kick it off.
Jacques Cousteau was not only my grandfather, he was also a pioneer, an inventor, an achiever of seemingly impossible tasks. And he went into the unknown, the undersea world. As the eldest grandchild, I got unprecedented access to be part of his exploits, diving into this beauty and majesty that very few people ever get a chance to see. A lot of these crazy ideas are born from my mind at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now I know how we can do this. Studying sharks the way we do, out of cages and throwing chum at them, is not the way to understand what these creatures are about. Let's become a shark.
Why get in this thing? Why?
The answer is, why not? People think I'm nuts. But if you think about it for a second, it's not so nuts. We've explored less than 5% of our ocean world to date. So there's a lot left down there to explore. We're going into cave systems that are not only mysterious and beautiful, but also quite dangerous. We're going to be diving into some very special caves with some mysteries that have never been brought to light before. Let's get wet. We're going to be going into lakes that have underwater villages and cities that have been submerged there for centuries. China has all sorts of strange mysteries. We're going into the Dragon's Hole, one of the deepest places in the world, and no one's really been down to the bottom. For unique projects like these, we need a special team. The team has to work very well together. We are culminating the best of the best. We'll be employing the latest, greatest in technologies, from the exosuit, which allows us to go down 2,000 feet, to ROVs, AUVs, submarines. This set of adventures is going to be very much Cousteau, but very much Cousteau 2018, because we'll go longer, deeper, and further than my grandfather or anyone else has done to date. It's the unknown. It's going to places, discovering new things that are potentially history-changing. there are dangers. It's a natural part of the process. It's one that we're ready for.
Fabian, what's going on?
You hear him?
It's just static.
Get him out of there!
Strike the word impossible from the dictionary. We can make anything happen if we set our minds to it.
Thank you. I kind of wanted to start on a positive note before we dive into the negative aspects. As a matter of fact, one of the beauties of our planet is that it's covered in water. 99% of our world's living space is represented by our ocean world, within which about 95% of our biodiversity lives and thrives. It is an amazing place. We've explored less than 5% of it. There's so much out there that we can still learn from and discover and really better ourselves, not just for adventure's sake and exploration's sake, but also for our very own future. And with that said, and what's changed over the last 3 generations, or I should say the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, is that even though that magical alien world has been so little explored, we're now going to places where no human being's ever been and seeing signs, very significant signs of human impact. I'm not a scientist. I work with scientists all the time, and as a student, a life student, I get a chance to learn from them and to be a witness myself when we go out there. And it's a travesty and devastating to see how we've treated our life support system on multiple levels, be it climate change or overconsumption of natural resources or pollution. We're treating our ocean as an endless resource in a garbage can. And we're surprised when we're seeing higher rates of cancer and all sorts of other diseases. We're surprised when prices go up in the supermarket. We're surprised when we're faced with some monumental challenges by our very own hand. So, and that's not even to broach the topic of overpopulation. That's discussion for another day. But without stealing thunder from the experts sitting on my right and my left, I'm more of a generalist, a storyteller, if you will. Of course, an addict to exploration, but hopefully being able to impart some of this knowledge to the greater public in various media is the mission that our families set for ourselves in an impassioning way, hopefully. But I'd like to show you the contrast of what that teaser is, which is meant to enthrall and get the network executives to sign on to buying a series, with some of the realities that we see in some of the farthest reaches of our planet. If you could click on that JPEG, which is right above those videos on the far, bottom left. That's the top. No, that would be too exciting. Videos down left. No.
And to interject, it is important for the media.
Left. Just about. Yep, that's the one. If you could blow that up for a bit on the screen, that would be great. This is how we treat our planet. Now take a good look. Is this something we want our children to inherit? I've heard testimonies from experts as grim as saying that within 50 to 75 years, this planet will become unlivable because of our actions. And although that may be pessimistic, maybe not, maybe it's optimistic, who knows? I don't think any of us in this room, and I would venture to think that most people on this planet would not want that for our children to inherit. So, to go to climate change, I think is what you had originally asked. I could sit here for hours to talk, but I know we have very limited time. Climate change is a very, very spooky topic for many reasons. It's an invisible killer. And we are seeing the repercussions of it, but in of itself doesn't have a face. And it's a a monumental global challenge rather than a regional one. So how do you explain to the average person who's just trying to make ends meet that their choices in the supermarket, their choices at the office, their choices of driving the vehicle that they're driving, their choices in general are not the right choices because of climate change? It's very difficult. We're right now in a very interesting political climate, and I know we're not supposed to talk about politics, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that, whereby 99% of the world is on board, and unfortunately, one decision maker is still yet to be convinced. A very important one. The Paris Accords, I thought, were a good step in the right direction towards climate change, but apparently it's not enough. We have an opportunity to use those challenges that we face for ourselves to create opportunity, innovation, and a better future for our children. For the Ocean Learning Center, we do this through empowering education activities, programs, as well as media to spread the word, so to speak, in ways that young people will actually pay attention to despite the advent of these things, or thanks to the advent of these things, as well as other ways. For example, we engage local communities in 3D printing of coral reefs to broach the topic of climate change. Now, coral reefs are affected by a number of variables, including climate change. It's not just that, there's pollution issues and so on. But in order for us to be able to put a face on climate change, we need to be able to put a physical memento, if you will, or target so that people pay attention. And being able to use new technology or modern technology to broach that topic is always a good one. In the case of 3D printing, we're actually able to use calcium carbonate, which is what the basic building structures of corals are, to build, let's call it virgin housing in the underwater cities, and invite zooxanthellae, or the fleshy stuff on corals, to come and populate those structures. There are hybridization techniques and such that we also use to help nature advance its adaptation so that we don't have as much coral bleaching in those restoration spots. But the main point is that we get people engaged in the conversation and in building the solution so that they can make better decisions at the end of the day in their own lives, every day at home, in businesses, and hopefully for the future. As you mentioned, we've lost 50% or more of our coral reefs since I was a little kid. Is that temporary? Is that permanent? Well, that's really up for us to decide, but realistically, our underwater cities are crumbling. The 72% or so of the flora and fauna that depend on coral reefs in their life cycles are going to be vastly stressed. And whether you care about the ocean, whether you care about coral reefs or not, it has very real-world implications on our global economy and our global health system. So with that said, I'm going to step off the soapbox, so to speak, because I know that there are a lot of people who actually need to speak beyond me. But thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. I would like to, at this juncture, because it is fresh what Fabian is saying. If anyone has any questions for Fabian, we can ask them now on anything that Fabian just discussed. Yes.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the sharks. I saw a program on What on Earth, and I don't remember the name of the woman, but I believe she was in South America, and she is swimming with the sharks. She became a shark. And so I'd like to just briefly, if you would, what it is about the shark that we have been misinformed about.
Well, I know Greg is an expert in sharks, Greg Stone, so I'm not going to step on his toes too much, but I would like to just start that answer by saying there's a huge misconception. Sharks are perfectly adapted animals. They're beautiful creatures. There are over 400 species out there. The variety is a reflection of their adaptation to the various climates and the various food systems and so on and so forth. As a general rule, I would consider them the same as the waste management in a city. Without waste management in a city, the city would very quickly become chaotic and crumble and would become a desolate place. We've unfortunately, after 400 million years, in just a few decades, have decimated the global populations of sharks to the tune of down to less than 10% of their original numbers. About 100 million or so, per the UN statistics, have been slaughtered every year. And yet, we have the advent of things like this week is Shark Week, so in honor of sharks. In general, we are bombarded by the media from the first day of summer to the last day of summer with shark attacks, seemingly shark attacks. Now take that to statistic for 1 second. 100 million sharks slaughtered every single year. And then if you look at the international shark attack files, which are the most complete, I won't say complete, but most complete out there in general, we have about 90 or so incidences worldwide of sharks having a negative encounter with a human being, of which 12 are fatal to the human being. And as tragic as that is to the human being and to their families and friends, the question that is begged is, who should be afraid of who? We have hundreds of millions of people swimming with sharks, hundreds of millions of sharks in those same waters every single year. And very few people ever have a negative encounter. As a matter of fact, it's a huge value added, economically speaking, for Florida, for Australia, for South Africa. It's a big money maker to go shark diving. People want to go see these sharks. And it just basically illustrates that a live shark is worth a lot more. I think it's, I don't know, Greg, how much is it? 100 times more than a dead one? Something like that. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to pass the baton over to my right side where Greg is.
Going to continue this conversation and more with Dr. Gregory Stone. He's an ocean scientist and explorer with over 10,000 dives using submarines, scuba gear, underwater habitats, and robotics. Dr. Greg Stone works to find ways for humanity and the ocean to coexist and support each other in the modern world. Dr. Stone, thank you for being here with us. We can speak with you for hours, but in a few unfortunate minutes, we would like to find out a little bit more about what's happening with our oceans in light of the climate change, the magnetic fields, the death of the coral reefs. Scientists say within 30 years, the coral reefs will die. The biodiversity and the ecosystems within that will as well, the plankton. And everything that's going on right now, what is it that we need to be aware of?
Sure. Let's see, can you hear me? Yeah. First, thank you for moderating. Thank you for Suzanne for putting this together. Fabian, great to see you here. And I have to tell just a little story. I don't know, but I think it was maybe the second time I had really spent any time with you or met you, or maybe it was the first, I can't remember. But I got an invitation to join Fabian underwater in this habitat that he was staying in for a month. And I had actually stayed in it myself for 10-day stretches several times. So I loved that place, one of my favorite habitats. And you invited me on World Ocean Day, I remember that. And it was to bring more awareness and everything. So I eagerly accepted. And then I had this young actor friend of mine I called up who was in Georgia filming one of his programs. And I said, it was Ian Somerhalder from Vampire Diaries. So I said, Ian, do you want to come visit Fabian Cousteau with me in this He said, absolutely. And I'll never forget popping up. There were some shots of the Aquarius up on that little sizzle reel, popping up inside, and there you were with 3 or 4 other aquanauts. Anyway, that was a fabulous day. I'll never forget that day. You just gave me a big charge. I tell you, and I can talk about any of that, but let me just say a couple of things here, just a couple of minutes here, kind of framing this a little bit more. And that is, what it's really all about is water. That's what I was invited here to speak to, is water. And it is an extraordinary substance. And I don't know how much many of you have stopped to think about it very much, but it's the universal solvent. I don't know if you know what that means, but what that means is that it will dissolve just about anything, and it will transport nutrients anywhere. So the fact that water is a universal solvent means that it can take nutrients out of the soil, carry them up into a plant, deposit them in the plant, and then you eat the plant, and the same thing happens all over again. The water in your body grabs the nutrients, because it's the universal solvent, and carries them through your body. I mean, it's extraordinary. As Lauren Isley said, if there is magic on earth, it is certainly water, is what he said. Water also is the only substance on earth that exists in all three phase states all the time: solid, gas, and a liquid. And that's another sort of one of its amazing qualities. One of the things that's always fascinated me is that we scientists figured the things out that I just told you, and there's more, through experimentation and observation. And then, by the way, when you add salt, the water turns into presto, life. I mean, that's the last magic ingredient in water, is when you add the salt, as in the oceans, it just is, it's incomparable. And the reason your blood is salty is because, indeed, life came from the ocean, and you carry the salinity of the ancient ocean in your blood today. Cellular biology has not figured out a better way to conduct its business than with salt water, because that's where it all started. So, but what's fascinating to me is that ancient cultures figured this out on their own through observation. It's empirical, right? Through many thousands of generations, they observed water and what it did in their world. And every culture, every ancient culture that has a continuous link to its ancient past, like we're actually honored to have people from Kiribati here, like good friends Christine and Bernaco, and they come from a culture that goes back many tens of thousands of years. Cultures like theirs and others pay respect for water through deities, through stories, through not science, but other ways. And by that system, they value the water. And I'm coming back to values and trying to connect with what Fabian was saying. One of the challenges today is our value system is based on what's happened over the last 100 years. It's based on what the stock market did yesterday. It's based on a variety of things. But if you get into an ancient culture, you find that the value system is actually based on things that will keep that society and those people going for many generations into the future. And it's a Darwinian kind of empirical value system that came into be. So I just want you all to really pause and think about how amazing water is, because it is. And that's what makes this planet such a great place, let me tell you. Without water, and in particular without an ocean like we have, we've got plenty of examples in our solar system of what this place would be like without an ocean. So we have come to the realization of late, thanks to people like Fabian and your grandfather. By the way, I would not be here today if it wasn't for Fabian's grandfather. I used to sit around, counting the days between those episodes. Even before I ever saw the ocean, I was enchanted by watching it on TV. So I think that media coverage and engagement is really incredibly important, and I'm really pleased that you've carried on that tradition with exploration and media and science. So that's kind of my framing, and if there's anything you all go away with today, I want you to remember why water is magical, because it's got special qualities. I mean, I didn't even really think about it until the last few years. I really started thinking about how amazing water is. It's not just something that's handy. It's not just something that you need. It is magic. It's the molecular structure of this element, of this molecule, that's absolutely drop-dead magic. Now, I think I should, I'm guessing I should maybe stop there because we have other speakers and you want to get into a discussion, but I'm happy to zero in on one of those things you mentioned if you'd like me to.
I think it's important for everyone to understand the latest alarming statistics that we need to be aware of as humans responsible for this earth,
Okay.
and what it is that we can do to reverse or help start reverse what's happening.
Sure. Well, the number of insults that we've placed on the planet. By the way, when I was in let's stay with one theme here. When your grandfather first started going to sea and doing the amazing things that he did, by the way, he was a young French naval lieutenant who figured out how to make air available underwater to divers. That was and I would say he changed the course of history with that invention. And there was about 1 billion people on the planet, I believe, around the time that he did that. Now there's 7 to 9 billion today. So that is the overriding kind of exponential thing that we're dealing with. Think about that. That's a lot of extra people. And it's the energy consumption, and by far, it's the climate insult that's occurring. It's the heating of this planet. This planet is not made. When you add energy to a system, and in this case, it's energy in the form of heat, the system becomes chaotic, okay? And that's why everybody says to me, well, if global warming is really happening, why is it snowing in Washington, D.C.? And I say, because the system has gotten chaotic. The storms are bigger, that's more unpredictable. That, to me, that's really the overriding concern is the heating of the atmosphere, the corresponding heating of the ocean, and then the animals and the plants and the systems in the ocean that sustain us that can't withstand those changes in such a short period of time. And that last part is really important. The oceans and the earth have gone through all kinds of gyrations over history, but never this fast. If it's slow, we can adapt, and animals can adapt. I liken it to, the difference now is like if you walk across the United States, you can adapt to everything that happens along the way because you're walking. Things are slow. But if you fly in a jet plane, it's too fast. And that's about the same scale of difference. The climate is changing like a jet plane when in the past it used to change at the speed of someone walking across the continent. So then you add on top of that taking too many fish out of the ocean, putting too much stuff in. Basically, we take too much out of the ocean that we want, and we put too much into the ocean that we don't want. That's a very simple way of thinking about it. And the plastic and chemicals that we don't see. It's also the largest. I mean, the great thing about the ocean, it's full of superlatives. It's the largest living space on the planet. It's the largest depository of water on the planet. It's the largest crime scene on the planet. It's where there's illegal fishing going on. It's illegal dumping of waste. It's the largest. You can keep adding. It's the largest life support system, and I'm getting particularly interested. I've done work on marine protected areas and climate adaptation, and I'm optimistic. By the way, I think that we have the wherewithal today, especially with the advent of, and I don't mean this in any trite way, to say that technology is going to solve everything, but it is changing at a rate that you just can't even imagine, and some of it's good. There's something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution that's going on right now, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution is about big data, it's about artificial intelligence, it's about machine learning, and those three things are transforming the way the world works. And I'm not plugging this, but I'm just guiding you. I just wrote a book with a colleague that's right here. It's called The Soul of the Sea. The Soul of the Sea in the Age of the Algorithm. And it's about this Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's also about the value systems I was talking about earlier. There's a whole section in the front and about how we value the ocean, what the different industrial revolutions have meant to us in the past. It's not actually going to be out in the world until October. You can pre-order it on Amazon. They might have a few copies at the UN bookstore here because I gave them a bunch for the conference last June. One more, or is that? Yes, I'd like to find out. I'll keep going, but I don't want to miss.
Pass on to Diana in a second.
Yeah, okay.
But in closing, what
Yes.
is your message to the viewers?
What is my message?
What is your message to everyone who's watching us as well as that's
Here's
here?
my message, and I guess ask this quite often. Well, what can I do? People always want to know what they can do, always. And My answer is that if everybody in the world did something, the world would change tomorrow.
One step at a time.
And what I mean by that is if hunger is your issue, work on that, or give some money to a hunger organization. If education is your issue, if it's healthcare, if it's oceans, if it's oceans, you can work with Diana's organization, the Plastics Pollution Coalition, Fabian's organization, my organization. There's a whole bunch out there. If it's fresh water, there are a lot of freshwater organizations. Just do something. That's my request. And also watch your own behavior as you go through life and think about your footprint on this very small, fragile planet.
On a 2-second intervention, I want to tell you all please to like the UNSRC Salus on Facebook, because we are posting always relevant events, and we try to do the well-being network and well-being lifestyle for everybody, and we are very interested in putting articles, putting videos, and everything that you can do as individuals, because we are gathered here today not by chance, just because we want to save the planet and we want action. So by connecting through the social network, we can see what's going on. We can have little tidbits and changes. So like today, I just brought glass bottles. From now on in my house, it's going to be glass bottles, because I would like to do all these kind of changes. Disposable cups that are biodegradable. No plastic utensils. Try to use the ceramics that are non-toxic as much as you can in your environment. And we thank you so much, because everybody here is doing wonderful, wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. We're going to move on to another topic that is, of course, very important, and we all should not even be carrying anything that has to do with bottles. We are passing the panel discussion on to Diane Cohen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Plastic Pollution Coalition. She's passionate, and she's an advocate against plastic pollution. PPC is a growing global alliance of nearly 600 organizations, businesses, and notable thought leaders working towards a world free of plastic pollution and toxic impact on humans, animals, and the environment. She is an LA-based visual artist who uses plastic in her artwork. She uses plastic bags as a primary material for the past 27 years, and Diane Cohen is interested in exploring its materiality through modifications and materials' relationship to culture, media, toxicity, and the world at large. Diane, welcome. They say it takes 450 to 1,000 years to biodegrade plastic and 500 years to degrade styrofoam. People are getting sick. Hormone levels are being disrupted because we are using plastic. Animals and fish, they're all dying. They're eating and feeding their babies plastic. Tell us what is going on and what it is that we can do to help, just distinguish this.
Okay, so thank you for having me, everybody. I'm going to go with Fabian's original thank you to everyone for coming. And my name is Diana Cohen. I'm a co-founder of Plastic Pollution Coalition, and I took over running the organization about 4 years ago. I'd like to share a short video with you guys that I think will give a very quick overview of the whole plastic pollution problem. Just quickly, it's much faster than I would be able to do it talking, because I can talk about this for about a week and a half straight. So let's do that, and then I'd like to talk about solutions, because I'm very solution-oriented. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Open your eyes. When did we become a plastic society? We got plastic bags, plastic water bottles, plastic straws, plastic cups, plastic wrap, plastic utensils, and plastic to-go containers. Plastic is a substance the earth cannot digest, and every bit of plastic that has ever been created still exists. Every day in the United States, we throw out almost 88,000 tons of plastic. Now, what happens to plastic after you use it? Well, most of it goes into landfills. A portion gets into the water course and eventually ends up in the oceans. Recycling is not a sustainable solution. It's actually called downcycling, because plastic never goes away. Consumption of disposable plastics has spiraled out of control. What is the number one thing plastic is made out of? Well, every year, we use 17 million barrels of oil to make plastic water bottles. This is enough to fuel 1 million cars every year. Plastic pieces on the ocean's surface now outnumber sea life 6 to 1. Plastic makes up almost 90% of all trash floating on the ocean's surface, 46,000 pieces of plastic per square mile. What effect does plastic have on human health? Plastic chemicals like BPA are absorbed by the body. Studies show that they alter hormones and disrupt the endocrine system. By refusing disposable plastic, you can improve the health of the ocean and the environment around us, including human health and animal health. Since 2009, Plastic Pollution Coalition has been building a global alliance to combat single-use disposable plastic. Our membership includes individuals, organizations, NGOs, businesses, campuses, and policymakers. We share resources, tools, and messaging with our coalition to develop a broad-based strategy to tackle the issue head-on. We're working with universities, businesses, festivals, musicians, and more to create replicable and sustainable approaches to eliminating single-use disposable plastic. Plastic pollution is a global problem that humans alone have caused. We can do something about it. Please join our coalition. For more information, visit www.plasticpollutioncoalition.org. Remember, bring reusable items with you, like a water bottle, a cup, a bag, utensils. Refuse plastic when it's offered. And remember to say, "No straw, please." Only purchase items in sustainable packaging, like glass and wax paper.
Yeah. 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 A lot of people contributed to the making of that video. I just like to actually, as a caveat to the video, say that when we say all the plastic ever created still exists, the plastic that doesn't exist anymore is the plastic that's been incinerated. And it becomes particulate pollution in the air when we incinerate it. So I just want to clarify that particular point, and then also let you know that as an artist making artwork mainly out of plastic bags, all of these, almost 3 decades, I'm not anti-plastic. I think plastic is an incredible, valuable material. What I have a problem with, and what over 600 NGOs and businesses around the world who are part of our coalition have a problem with, is designing and using this material with intended obsolescence. So designing things out of it that are intended for us to use them for a very short amount of time. And in retrospect, literally this is crazy. I mean, this is, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen a comedy called Idiocracy. There's a movie called Idiocracy. But it's that. It kind of imagines a near future where we wake up and we live in a giant garbage dump. And that's basically happening. And when we talk about water and the ocean, that is what we are doing to the ocean. And it literally breaks my heart. And I feel emotional listening to Fabian and listening to Greg talk about this, because we've all been colleagues now for some time, and I know that they've had their own experiences with the impact of plastic and what it's doing to our waterways and our oceans, to sea life, to turtles, to whales and dolphins, and we see that more and more in the news now. And there was a very big report that just came out last Wednesday that was carried in the New York Times and the Guardian, and I actually brought a copy of it with me, but it's on our website. And the title of it is Plastics, Production, Use, and Fate of All Plastics Ever Made. And it's the first study of its kind, which is a comprehensive look at how much plastic we've created in this century, and really since the 1950s, which is when there was a big boom in creating single-use and disposable plastics and marketing to people. Another thing I'd like to say is, obviously I've seen our video many times, but this is not just a problem that we want to put on citizens or people at large. That is something that I think industry has done a very good job of just telling your normal citizen, oh, you just need to put it in the bin, keep America beautiful, keep the world beautiful, and everything's going to be fine. Well, that's not a solution. That's an industry solution. And the industry solution is that we recycle things. We put things in a recycling bin. But the reality of recycling is that the percentages of things that are actually recycled or downcycled is very, very low. It's very low in the United States, and this new study says it's something like 2% for the world. And actually, it gives a very specific amount. It says 91% of plastic internationally is not recycled. Only 12% has been incinerated. Again, that creates particulate pollution, which is linked to asthma and all different kinds of problems, and is a social justice issue because it